there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Welcome. Today, I'm thrilled to be speaking with James Kimmel, author of The Science of Revenge, who has joined Choose Love as one of our newest advisors. James's groundbreaking research has uncovered something that could revolutionize how we understand and address conflict in our schools and communities. That revenge operates as a powerful addiction in the human brain, one that most people don't even recognize they have. This discovery has profound implications for educators, parents, and anyone working to create safer, more compassionate environments for children. James's work is helping us understand why traditional approaches to discipline and conflict resolution often fail. And more importantly, it's giving us new tools to break cycles of retaliation before they escalate. You know that I've always been a huge proponent of proactive prevention. As we integrate these insights into Choose Love programming, and a lot of which we already have, we're not just teaching students to manage their emotions, we're helping them understand and overcome one of the most destructive patterns in human behavior. James's research is showing us that when we address revenge addiction at its root, we can create lasting change that transforms not just individuals, but entire communities. James, thank you for joining us today and for bringing us this revolutionary perspective to Choose Love and the world.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Scarlett. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and I'm really excited about working with you.
Thanks so much. We are absolutely thrilled. I feel like I've been waiting my whole life, or maybe just the last 12 years of my quest to keep our kids safe and well. And I've been focusing on the grievance end of the pathway to violence. I've been saying, unless we can be proactive and preventative, unless we can address the root cause of the suffering that leads to not only violence, but substance abuse and mental illness, most mental illnesses as well, we're never going to get ahead of the problem. And by the way, we haven't. When we're still addressing it reactively for the most part, and that leaves us always a step behind, learning from mistakes, running to catch up. We haven't done it, and I really do believe that you have found the missing piece, and it's so exciting. I am absolutely thrilled, and I know, you know, me and along with the audience is wondering. So you've written this incredible book, The Science of Revenge, understanding the world's deadliest addiction. Let me repeat that, because I mean, my gosh, we've got fentanyl, we've got all these other things, but you're saying understanding the world's deadliest addiction and how to overcome it. Wow. So I think it's funny, you know, I always joke, I'm like, this is my summer reading. So you're like, this is the best book, and I'm so excited about it. Like most people would do, like, you know, maybe a fiction book, you know, about some seaside resort and lovers and all. I'm fangirling over The Science of Revenge. What would cause somebody to focus their life on The Science of Revenge?
Yeah, sure. That's probably a good description of what has become my life's work, I guess. And that starts when I was in school in central Pennsylvania as a middle schooler and then a teenager. And uh, my folks had made a move and moved my family when I was about 12 from a suburban house to a house on a farm on the country that had been owned by my great grandfather. And so when I landed there at age 12, it was this wonder world of, real awesomeness. I mean, it's a great place to be a boy on a farm. We had a small herd of Black Angus cattle and pigs and chickens. And I really loved it. I loved it so much that probably from that moment until I was, in high school, senior in high school, or junior in high school, I should say, probably. My goal was to become a farmer as a career. I mean, I really wanted to do that. And as part of that, when we moved, I wanted to befriend and hang out with and play with and learn from the kids on the surrounding farms where I lived, and they all lived on really big dairy farms, and their families made their livings from those farms. In my case, my dad didn't. He wasn't a farmer. He was an insurance agent, and the herd of cows that I mentioned and pigs and things were owned by my great grandfather, and I took care of those animals with him. Um, but the guys, and we had this old beat up, junky little tractor that didn't work half the time, and it was a big frustration. But the other kids, on the big farms had the big cool equipment, and I loved all of that. And so I wanted to befriend them. And when I reached out to them, they weren't having it. Which later, in trying to figure out why they continually rejected me, it may have been because I really I wasn't authentic farm stock. I hadn't been raised there. I wasn't born there. And the more they pushed me away, the more I wanted to win them over. And I did everything I could. I joined VOAG shop classes in my high school, my junior high school, and even my senior high school. And I was a member of Future Farmers of America, and I dressed like them, and I did everything I could to fit in, but they still weren't having it. And when I wouldn't be deterred, they started bullying me. And there was a pretty good sized group of them. They were a bunch of big guys. I'm not a huge guy, and there was only one of me. So the bullying started with just harassing me getting on and off the bus verbally, and harassing me in the hallways and places where they could find me. But then that started to escalate beyond just verbal harassment into physical assaults. Knocking me around, knocking me down, tripping me, kicking me, stuff like that. That started to make my life in school pretty miserable, and my journey to and from school on the bus, something that I loathed and didn't want to go through every day. It was just everyday hazing torment at both ends of that ride. And but that was enough. This was in the early 1980s. There were no anti-bullying programs in my school. Uh, it just seemed like you were supposed to put up with this or potentially confront and fight them. But I knew I would get, the stuffing kicked out of me if I did that mode. So I just tried to put up with it and tolerate it. Then one night, we lived on a one-lane country road, and uh, my folks and I, we were all asleep at night, and we were awakened to the sound of a gunshot. And when I looked outside, I was about 16 or 17 years old at this time, and we all ran to the windows. And when I looked outside, I saw this pickup truck that had been owned by one of the guys who had been bullying and harassing me, and I saw it taking off down the road. So we looked around the house to see if there was any damage, if they had shot a hole through a window, anything like that, and we didn't find anything, which was good. So we eventually went back to sleep. But in the next morning, one of my jobs was to take care of those animals and to go out and feed and water the cattle and the pigs, and also this beautiful beagle hunting dog that we owned. And when I went to her pen, I found her lying dead with a bullet hole in her head, which is pretty shocking stuff. So,
That's awful. We just lost our beagle. I mean,
mm,
but not like that. And that is,
yeah.
oh my God, for a kid to come out and escalating that bullying now to using a gun and terrorizing your family as well. That's a big escalation. So, I mean, what did you do?
Yeah, so my folks called the police, and they took the report, but they also said they really weren't going to do anything more than take the report, and if it continued or escalated further, they would get involved. But this was state police that cover a gigantic territory in the country, um, and so nothing really happened to them, and we went back to business as usual, unfortunately. And so a few weeks passed, and I was home alone at night. One night, my parents had gone out somewhere, and I heard a vehicle come to a stop on this one lane road that I mentioned, which was pretty unusual. There'd be no reason for anyone to come to a stop in front of our house at night, normally anyway. And so I got up to see what was going on. And as I did that, there was a flash and an explosion. And that same pickup truck, started roaring down the road again, but it left behind now our mangled mailbox. So they had, blown up our mailbox on its post. And with that explosion, that was kind of it for me. I had put up with, like I said, years of bullying and the death of the dog now, and now an explosion and destruction of our property. And I was home alone, like I said. And so I'd had it. I ran. I grabbed a gun, loaded gun from my father's nightstand. I'd probably been, shooting guns since I was maybe 8 years old or so. Out in the country, we were hunters, had lots of guns of different kinds. And so I grabbed this revolver and I ran through the house, jumped into my mother's car, and I went after them. So I'm speeding down this one lane road, screaming in rage, and I finally catch up to them, and I corner them on one of their farms, in front of one of their barns. So it's their pickup truck kind of cornered against a barn, and in my car behind them, with my brake beams on, and I can see 3 or 4 heads in the truck window. Um, and they slowly get out and turn to face my car, and they're squinting through the headlights trying to figure out who had just come tearing down their road, chasing after them. And they may or may not at that moment have recognized it was my mother's car. I don't know. But what was clear to me is that they were unarmed, in the sense that they had nothing in their hands. Maybe there were weapons in the truck, but there was no reason to think that, or know that, I should say. And the other thing that was clear to me is that they couldn't have known that I had a gun. And so I had this, element of surprise. And so I got out of the car. I grabbed the gun first. I opened the driver's door and I put my leg through the opening. And as I was, doing that and getting ready to, confront them and potentially shoot and kill them, I had this just quick flash of insight that if I went through with that, my whole life, to the extent that it continued, would be very different, and I'd be killing a huge part of me, or all of me, the me that I thought I knew up to that minute, and I would be a very different person who drove away, if in fact I was able to drive away. And that I knew I'd been raised better than that, and I knew that I wasn't a killer, and I knew I didn't want to wear that label the rest of my life. And that was just enough to cause me to stop and slide back into the car, put the gun back down, pull the door closed, and drive home. But it was a huge pivotal moment in my life, because I'd come within seconds of changing everything and maybe ending other people's lives. So it was a big deal.
Yeah, and then I'm sure the police would have gotten involved then,
Yeah,
and you would have been arrested and probably still be in jail.
correct.
Possibly. Yeah. So you were able to, and we know the neuroscience behind it, engage the brake through, curiosity and thinking about it and the impact of your own life. But so many people haven't done that, obviously have been in the same situation, and they go ahead and they act out their pain, they take revenge, and they go through with it. And so, you know, you talk about why that is. And the interesting thing for me is that we all have those feelings. I was kind of right there with you, you know, going through vicariously the emotion of having your dog shot and then the mailbox blown up. And I was right there with you in the car, ranting and raving and cheering you on, basically. Because that's how our brains work. And I've learned from you that we actually get pleasure from that, which is pretty amazing. I do want you to get into that, but I think it's really interesting too. You had that insight, but then in your book, you explain, you go on to, you don't necessarily carry it out yourself, but then you become an attorney that carries out sort of revenge for your clients. So
Yeah,
you actually kind of did, in a way, continue down that path a little bit, right?
yeah, I did. I very much did. And, you know, I just, you know, as you were saying that, it, you know, I sort of had the living, you know, before we move on from that point for a second, I had the living John Wick story, right? If you're familiar with the movie John Wick, and his beagle was killed, it's unbelievable. And then he goes out on a killing spree of his own. And I don't know how many sequels there have been to that. So that has borne a lot of pain and suffering in those movies. And the reason those movies are so popular, as you said, is because humans are able to empathize. And so we empathize with John Wick. And we feel his pain of having our dog being shot, just as you did now. And maybe your audience is as well, feeling my pain. And so we now have this powerful grievance, and our brains don't like pain, and they want to rebalance themselves with pleasure. And we can get into that neuroscience in just a little bit. But I just wanted to kind of, you know, be able to come back to that when we're talking about the neuroscience, because it helps in understanding it to have some sort of real life example. And this is certainly a powerful one that many people have seen in the movies too. And but back to your statement. So I didn't forgive them at that point. You know, what I did is I made a decision that was in my own self-interest, right? I was, and that's all we really need to do, is act in our own self-interest, as long as we're capable and able at these pivotal moments to see what that is, and then act in that direction. Uh, Go
Choose,
ahead.
right?
What's that?
Choose.
Choose. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
as long
choose
as we
the
have
thought
the, we
response
can,
rather than reaction. Yeah.
absolutely right. So I left, but like I said, I didn't leave my desire for revenge against them behind. I didn't forgive them. I just knew that carrying it out in that way on that day at that time would be, you know, a huge a lifetime disaster for me. And I'm glad that that happened, obviously, or I wouldn't be here, as you say. Uh, but but still wanting revenge, and just knowing I didn't want to pay such a high price to get it in that way. Eventually, I came upon the idea, and it's easier to, you know, kind of put a label on that today than it was when I was you know, junior and senior in high school. But um, I believe that part of my attraction to, well, what am I going to do next? Because, like I said at the beginning, I wanted to be a farmer. That was the career I was choosing. And I knew that when I left there, that career path was dead, right? It was over for me. I wasn't going to have that path. And I didn't even want it anymore. I thought, if this is what it's going to take, and it's going to put me this close to disaster, I don't want any part of it. And so I abandoned that and needed to look at another direction. And what I came upon the idea of was going into the professional revenge business, which is to say, by becoming a lawyer. And, you know, lawyers have this special license. We're the only people that have it in society to, you know, prescribe, manufacture, and distribute revenge to the masses in a legalized form. And it's not very different at all from the same, you know, the license that doctors have to prescribe and distribute, or, you know, order the distribution of a powerful drugs like an opioid, right? Your doctor can prescribe an opioid, and it's legal and it's okay, even though it gives you the same high and the same addictive effects that you would receive if you bought it from a guy on a street corner. It was called heroin instead of OxyContin, right? It's a difference in branding and, how society wants to view it. And with, revenge, there's a new brand as well to legalize it, and we call it justice, right? The brand that we sell as lawyers is we sell justice, and we similarly to doctors and pharmaceutical companies, the argument is, oh, it's different. It's not even kind of different. It's really different. This is the safer version. And we found out, tragically with the medical profession that, prescribed opioids are just as dangerous as street opioids, and you can get addicted to them and they can ruin your life. And that's also true of prescribed revenge in the name of justice seeking. So I became a lawyer, and I started being a criminal prosecutor for a little while. But I moved on to becoming a civil litigator because the money was better, really. And in both cases, as a prosecutor, you're seeking justice in the form of revenge on behalf of society and the victims of crime. Whereas as a civil litigator, you're seeking justice in the form of revenge on behalf of your particular private clients, whether it's an individual or individuals or a company or an organization of some sort. So as I did that and became, as I grew to become a better and better litigator and lawyer, what that really meant was getting better and better at winning justice in the form of revenge for my clients. And that entailed winning very small interim battles inside of every lawsuit that probably a lot of people don't know about unless you've been through litigation. But there are, it's sort of a death by 1,000 cuts in terms of, there's little pivotal moments in every lawsuit, and there are many, many of them, and you can win or lose those. They could be a phone call when you're arguing with a lawyer, or you are in a deposition fighting with that lawyer and the clients are both present. You could be winning or losing a motion. There's all sorts of ways and strategies to kind of get through this. But what is happening, at least for me, and I began to observe anecdotally for other lawyers on the other side of me and their clients, and for my clients, was that we were really getting little pleasurable highs from each one of these wins, and we were suffering losses and feeling really bad for each one of these losses. But we could even derive pleasure from our losses because we would know that we were making life difficult and painful for the other side at the end of the day. And that was a great, pleasurable experience. We're making the other side suffer even before we lose or win the case, even before we get a determination of, whether there's going to be a judgment in favor of my client or yours. I can make you suffer almost every day, or I can try to. And the other lawyer on the other side is doing the same thing. So there's this.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
just go back to, and I want to pull together what you said a little bit earlier, and then I want you to go on. You were talking about, and I'm not sure that everybody followed that's listening, opioids.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about revenge. So, the connection there, I think it's really interesting, is that you started on the revenge path when you were a child because of bullying, and that never went away. So you actually chose a profession that allowed you to continue the cycle of revenge. And, what you're saying is that you, like opioids, you became addicted. You just became addicted to what we call justice, and but it's just kind of an umbrella for seeking revenge.
Yeah, I'm glad you're clarifying that. And I would say I didn't understand any of this at that time, right? So,
I didn't
yeah.
understand any of it either.
Right, right. So, I mean, this is just like the background story behind what caused me to ultimately become a researcher at Yale, to understand my gut instinct at the time and see whether there was any scientific evidence for it, that I was becoming addicted to what felt like a drug-like high response in my head, and that the lawyers and my clients, their clients, we were all hooked on this thing, but didn't really realize it. But as I went through this process of being a lawyer, I really sort of focused on it for about 20 years. Um, I started to get these highs. My clients got them. They were paying me lots of money uh, for the highs. It was clear because sometimes they didn't really even care what the outcome was, as long as I could, deliver for them at the end of the day. Oh, we really pissed them off at that point in time. Sorry for the language there, but we really upset the other side, um, and made them have a bad day, is what I'm saying. And that that experience started to look addictive for me, and started to infect my own life. So it left the law and eventually became my personality, where I was doing it with my wife and my kids and my other family members and friends and people I would encounter in life, in which, anytime somebody seemed to offend me or insult me, I would come out with some pretty tough, responses to it, and then feel good about delivering that hurtful response back to them to try and hurt them, and then feel bad about it, and then just redo it again.
Right. So you're spiraling.
Yeah.
And you probably made a little bit of the connection. Wow, I felt like this when I grabbed my gun and I was
Yeah.
in the car, and now I'm doing it to clients, but now you're doing it in other areas of your life. And even though you're making a lot of money and you're what the world considered successful, and you have a great career and you're getting these hits of pleasure for making other people suffer and be in pain, is not doing anything for you. You're not happy.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of roots. It's like I said, death by a thousand cuts. But for Avengers, people who seek revenge, it is really very much a death by a thousand cuts. Also to you, you think that only the victims are suffering, but the person who inflicts revenge, you can't. I like to tell people, you can't become the source of another person's pain without experiencing a piece of the pain that you inflict. It's
Wow.
not possible to avoid. And I have, a visual way of looking at that is, a hammer striking a nail. And, when, a big heavy steel hammer hits this little nail, you're like, oh, poor nail just got driven into the wood. That must have hurt. But you have to realize that that impact was experienced by the hammer too. The hammer, can't drive the nail without experiencing the impact of the blow. And so it's a really important kind of thing to be aware of at human scale. So, I started to see this, and I started to go, the law is destroying me. It was making me miserable. And I thought it was the law, right? I was really not focused on revenge or justice seeking. It was just the practice of law for a while, because it took me a long time to understand at a much more deeper level what about the law was really making me ill. And I wanted to get away from it, but I couldn't. I tried to go from big firms to small firm to my own firm, full-time to part-time. But I kept getting, dragged back into it, in part for the money and in part because, I missed those opportunities to make myself feel better by making other people feel worse and getting paid for it. It was just this kind of habituated, what I thought might be at that point, as I sort of bottomed out at one point, kind of all by myself, alone in a spare bedroom, going, contemplating suicide at this point, and going, this is bad. I'm in really bad shape, and I don't know what's happening to me. But it started to become more and more clear. I didn't have addiction. I don't have other addictions in my life, but I've had, family members and friends that have, and I started to go, this kind of looks like, what we think of when somebody's addicted, right? It looked this way. And I had a client who was a psychologist, and I asked him about how you diagnose somebody with addiction. And he turned me on to the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that doctors use, and the definitions of substance use disorders. And when I read that book, or I read this specifically, the factors for diagnosing somebody with a substance use disorder, which is another way of saying a drug addiction. if I replaced the word substance in that list with the word revenge, or I should say justice at the time is what I was putting it in, because I was really working with the brand name, right? Instead of the actual what it is. I went, oh my gosh, I hit about 7 of 11 of the criteria, and which would be diagnosable as having a severe substance use disorder. And I thought, maybe there's something to this. Now, my psychologist friend thought there was nothing to this, which was fair, and made complete sense, because medicine hadn't recognized this at that point in time. So he just thought I was kind of burned out and needed a break and maybe needed to take a vacation.
He's looking at
yeah.
the DSM and he's saying, I don't see revenge in here. So
Right.
it can't be an
That's
addiction, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So at that point, I went, I'm going to have to help myself, because there are there's no rehabs for justice addicts or revenge addicts. There are no therapies or drugs or 12-step programs for justice or revenge addicts either. So I decided to turn to a spiritual. I took a spiritual quest to try and understand what the world's religions say about justice seeking and revenge seeking versus the alternative of forgiveness. And I found in that study, and I wrote my first book was about that spiritual journey. It wasn't scientific; it was a spiritual approach at first. And I learned in that, looking at all of the world's major religions, that pretty much there's a scriptural passage that would support almost anything you want to do. So if it's eye for an eye that you want that day, and you want to inflict as much pain upon the person who wronged you as possible and call it justice, there's passages for that. If you're, a forgiving person, or you want to be, or you want other people to be forgiving, then you can point to forgiveness passages, right? And so it was kind of in the end, it was a great experience to go through this, but it didn't have a decisive conclusion of, here's this true spiritual answer, because humans are behind the religions, and humans will write into them whatever they need to do in order to justify or sanctify what they want, including justice seeking in the form of revenge. So that was pretty frustrating. And it's about that time, though, that I wasn't willing to let go of this idea that revenge was addictive. And at that moment, this is like 2004 or 5, it was the time when the first brain study was performed, brain scanning, brain imaging study using fMRI, to see what's happening inside your brain when you experience a grievance. If you give a study participant a grievance and an opportunity to retaliate, right? An opportunity to punish. And what that first study found, and this happened right before I'd finished writing my spiritual manuscript, and so I was able to include it in my first book, but it was a small piece and it was only one study. But what they found is that when you have a grievance, your brain starts activating the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction, which is the dorsal striatum in that study. There are really two, the nucleus accumbens and the dorsal striatum. So that was the first piece of scientific evidence that I had ever found that my hunch about the addictiveness of revenge seeking might be for a real thing. And that launched me on an all new quest. Instead of a spiritual quest, it became a scientific quest.
I choose love.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit ChooseLoveMovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
So, did you, in your spiritual quest, and you're talking about forgiveness, did you go through a process of forgiveness? Were you able to go back and consider forgiveness for the bullying behavior that you received, and as well as probably practicing some sort of forgiveness for yourself for all of the pain and suffering that you have caused other people through your search for justice?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good insight. So I did say, I needed to come up with some way to kind of save myself. And I didn't answer really the question of what did I come up with then, because, the spiritual. So what I came up with at that time, this is back in 2004 and 2005, is I kind of repurposed the way that humanity works trials, right? So the trial of somebody who wrongs you, is a very archetypal type of process. It goes back thousands of years, where humans have, decided that one way of managing their conflicts and maybe putting some distance between you and the weapon, the arrow, the knife, the club, or the gun, is to have an independent tribunal who will listen to evidence from both sides, weigh that evidence, come up with a decision of whether there's guilt or innocence. If there's guilt, consider and maybe hand down a sentence of punishment. And then that punishment gets carried out, right? That's the traditional criminal justice system that we all know very well, either from our own experiences or from seeing that played out in television and movies.
And I think when you're
go ahead.
talking about justice, I think that's what everybody's thinking of, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody's thinking justice is seeing the person that hurt you punished in some way, suffering like you suffered. I think for the most part, that's the definition of justice that comes into our heads.
Yeah, and it's a fair definition of it, but that is also the definition of revenge. That is what revenge is. Revenge is punishing or wanting the punishment of someone who hurt you. In other words, when you feel wronged or mistreated or treated unjustly, you don't want cotton candy or an ice cream cone, which is what you could want. Our brains could want to feel better with something pleasurable like, ooh, nice ice cream and maybe a nap or a massage or a walk in the park. That's not what we want, though. What we want so deeply is we want the pain of the person who wronged us or their proxies. That's the craving that we all experience.
Here's the thing. I think I kind of sometimes think from my audience's point of view, and I'm hearing some of my audience think, I don't want that. I've never thought I want to pick up a gun. I've never wanted to kill anybody. I personally have, but I'm sure that some people are out there thinking he's not describing me. But why are you describing every single person when you talk about revenge? How does revenge bring us all together as humanity?
Right. And you do it because most people, most of the time, use nonviolent forms of revenge. So if you have, you may say what you just said, but I will bet you in your life, in everyone's life, there are times when you were treated unfairly or you felt insulted, and you responded either with a cold shoulder or withdrawing your support or involvement or ending a relationship, or you've slung an insult back. If somebody called you a jerk and you said, no, you're a jerk. Or if you flipped somebody off when you were driving your car and they cut you off in traffic or honked their horn. Or if you have tried to sabotage someone who maybe got on the wrong side of you in ways that are pretty small. Maybe you sabotaged their relationship with someone else, or maybe hoped and maybe took some steps to make their life more difficult and make sure that they know or experience some form of discomfort or pain is what you're looking for in those moments in time. And we know from studies that this desire for pain when we've been wronged manifests throughout the lifespan. So toddlers experience it. It's been seen at even the toddler years, and then all the way up through senior years. So it's a lifespan experience. And it's been observed in all societies and cultures around the world when that's been assessed as well. So we know that the desire for revenge is kind of as common and is built in and wired into all human brains, or nearly all of them, with I'm sure there are exceptions to any rule, but it's pretty close to all. And that's what it's thought to be by evolutionary psychologists. And we know that and you can think of it this way, we're all also wired to experience euphoria and a high if we take an opioid, right? Percocet or something like that. All people, we're all wired that drug, an opioid, will cause us to experience a lessening of pain and an increase in euphoria and some type of a high type of experience, right? And that's and it doesn't matter whether it's a legal or illegal version of that. And it's the same way with justice and revenge. It doesn't matter whether it's illegal or not legal. We all experience the high and the desire for some form of revenge, nonviolent or violent, when somebody wrongs us. We think about it, we fantasize about it. Sigmund Freud said that, or observed that during our lives, we go through day by day and hour by hour, doing away with inside our heads the people who insult us or wrong us. So it's a very, very common experience. And if you've enjoyed, the other way to think about it is this: if you've ever watched any TV show, any movie in which the protagonist was injured, and that means almost all of them, and then you started wanting the punishment, or to see the punishment of the person who hurt them, and you wanted to see them being gotten back. And by the end of the movie, the producers and filmmakers delivered that to you, and you're satisfied that happened now. You're like finally happy. Then you have experienced revenge-seeking pleasure right at that moment. And that's what entertainment is all about.
Rambo, my favorite movie, right? I don't even like violence, but I love Rambo, and I know why, for sure. And so you have actually found and seen in brain scans that our brain on revenge looks the exact same as our brain on drugs. So in other words, revenge works on the exact same channels and circuitry in our brain as drug addiction.
Yeah, right. Wow. So here's the process. Let's just go through it really quickly. So when you experience a grievance, which is to say a real or imagined, and that's critical, it doesn't matter whether it's real or imagined, perception. If you perceive a real or imagined insult, experience of injustice, betrayal, humiliation, shame, any of these common types of psychological pains that we all experience, when you experience that anytime in your life, it literally activates the pain network inside your brain, which is the anterior insula. And when that happens, your brain hates pain. It doesn't want pain. It wants to rebalance itself with pleasure. And it almost immediately, then in response to the pain, activates the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction, this dorsal striatum and nucleus accumbens. And the dopamine, and the brain starts to experience a dopamine surge. And that's around the seeking or beginning to fantasize about inflicting pain upon the person who wronged you or their proxy. So the target of revenge isn't only the actual person who wronged you. It may be, and very often is, ultimately someone else who maybe had nothing to do with hurting you. But you can gratify your desire for revenge by inflicting pain upon that person. And quick example of that is, you have a bad day at work, somebody, maybe your boss or a coworker, insults you, and you can't retaliate against them at work, or you might lose your job. So you go home, but you still want revenge, and maybe you pick an unfair fight with your partner or a child, or you, in the classic sense, kick the dog, which we always chalk that down to, oh, we're taking it out on the dog. Or if you just hit your fist into a wall, and you're smashing, you're delivering pain to the wall. We think we're taking it out on that, but taking it out, what that really means is that you are gratifying your desire for revenge in that process against that specific victim, person or object that you're now victimizing. So it's a very common process, and revenge by proxy is often staged, and it may be, I don't know statistically what we could really say, but there are lots and lots of times and examples when we hurt people who had nothing to do with the original hurt to ourselves through justice.
Like a school shooter?
Like a school shooter.
Back to the school and murders children indiscriminately because of a grievance.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that is so what we know about revenge itself, that is that desire to inflict pain and the actual infliction of it, is that revenge, the desire for revenge, is the root, primary, number one cause of almost all forms of human violence. That goes from school bullying to intimate partner violence to street and gang violence to violent extremism, terrorism, genocide, war, all of the way, the full spectrum. At the root of almost every one of those events at every time has been somebody either imagining or actually experiencing a grievance, which is, again, to say, a sense of injustice, unfairness, or being wronged, and wanting to hurt that person because they felt hurt first. In other words, it is very true to say that most perpetrators feel that they are victims first. You don't become a perpetrator until you have experienced victimization. Otherwise, you have no motive to go out and hurt people. It doesn't feel good, and it has nothing to do with quote unquote evil. The evil and the badness that we have called this process for thousands of years, the evil or badness is this circuitry in the mind that causes you to want to hurt other people because you feel that they have hurt you.
That's incredible. And I always think when people call school shooters evil, monsters, things like that, I always feel like now, 12 years later, it's such a cop out, because in essence, what they're saying is that person is bad and I am good. And in essence, what you're saying is you're leveling the playing field. Actually, you're saying what that person felt, that victimization, that revenge seeking, you have felt as well, person that is looking in and thinking that you're not at all like that other person. But in actuality, we have all had these thoughts of revenge. And it kind of, I think that it will help us understand and move towards compassion, where we can possibly deal with these revenge seekers in a more effective way than we have before, because now we can identify what is actually going on in the brain, instead of, kind of saying, well, it was a grievance, but we can't identify the grievance. There were so many, we don't know which one to pick. And the problem with that is, if you can't identify the why somebody does something, how can you fix it? You're saying it doesn't really matter the grievance. We know it comes from a grievance, but the baseline and foundation of all grievances is this revenge seeking addiction. And that is a game changer.
Well, the way to think about it that I think is helpful is to say there are an infinite number of grievances in the world, okay? And you can visualize that or imagine how that could be true by thinking about it this way. Think of all of the number of people in the world and all of the seconds in a day and all of the thoughts that all of those people can have at any time. And real or imagined thoughts of and perceptions of I've just was insulted and I was just offended and you disrespected me and you betrayed me, and you humiliated or shamed me. All of that can happen. And again, it's real or imagined. So we're talking about billions upon billions, and then times thoughts, times the hours of a day. So we're really thinking about something that feels like an infinite world of grievances. And that trying to solve all of those grievances, infinitely impossible then, because if there are an infinite number, right, it's pretty much impossible to resolve it, particularly because a lot of them are imagined, and that, a panel of quote unquote grievance judges that doesn't exist, but if they did, might sit around and go, that wasn't a real grievance. It wouldn't have bothered most people most of the time, but it bothered you. Well, if it bothers you, that's sufficient to stimulate your revenge seeking desires. So it doesn't matter whether it was real or imagined. So what we can do, instead of trying to solve for an infinite number of grievances, is solve for the one, and think of it as a funnel that's capturing all the grievances. All those grievances go inside of our heads to the one and the same addiction pathway. They all produce the same one addiction craving response, and that is a craving for revenge. We can solve for one. We can do that. We have been doing that and gotten much and much better at it over the last decades in solving that for drug addiction and gambling addiction and other forms of addiction. So we could use addiction prevention and treatment strategies now to prevent and treat violence. And we start that with kids in schools, right where we start the process of educating kids about other dangerous cravings and addictions, like drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, like the desire for sex. We are smart enough, finally, now as a society, to go, kids are going to run into and encounter and experience these powerful cravings, these powerful drugs, this powerful drive for sex. And we need to educate them to help protect them and help them make, as you say, really good choices and slow it down. But we don't do this for the one most dangerous addiction of all. And the reason it's the most dangerous and deadly is because, unlike, injecting a needle into your own arm, if you're a drug addict, revenge addicts can only get their high by injecting, at the extreme end, bullets into the bodies of other people. It's the same process. You're just targeting somebody differently, and that's what makes it the most addictive. But like I said, it doesn't have to be bullets. It can also just be unkind words, or, like I said, betrayals and cutting off relationships and doing things that can retaliate against other people to make them feel worse for your own gratification. This means that guns are substances of abuse, similarly to drugs.
Wow.
And guns and bullets. So
wow.
we need to think about them that way. It doesn't mean that we can't do anything, though, if society is unwilling to engage in controlling access to most guns, which is unfortunate. And it would be better if we put at least the same amount of controls on guns that we put on things like fentanyl. You know what I mean?
However, even if we did, let's say there were no guns, that doesn't take care of revenge. People would use other tools and implements to act out their revenge. What is the only thing that stops that cycle of revenge? Is there something that stops the cycle of revenge?
Yeah, so we are hardwired for that. And I'm glad you brought that up. So there are two things that we can do about this. The first is we can use addiction prevention and treatment strategies, including education, public health education. We can use a public health approach, counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, and things like that for people that are already addicted. Okay. Prevention is for people who are not yet. Treatment is for those who have it. But inside of our brain,
prevention is choose love and programs like that, proactively reducing and preventing the want for revenge.
Yes.
But
But here's the more exciting part of it. And the neuroscience, at the same time that neuroscientists around the world were studying the desire for revenge, some accidentally started studying the science of forgiveness. And here's what happens inside your brain if you forgive. Neurologically, there it is. Neurologically, here's what occurs. when you simply imagine forgiving, you don't even forgive the person and you don't have any conversation with them about maybe forgiving them or telling them about it. You never have to have that conversation. This is something that's internal to you. But here are the brain biological benefits you get by simply imagining forgiveness without even doing it. First, when you do that, it shuts down the pain circuitry, that anterior insula, the pain network of the brain. In other words, think about this. Forgiveness stops pain. It's been shown on brain imaging studies, it stops the pain network. It shuts it down versus revenge seeking, which the best it can do is give you a temporary dopamine cover up over the pain that doesn't last very long and the pain comes raging back afterward. Forgiveness actually stops pain. It shuts down that network. The second thing it does is it shuts down the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction. So it stops the revenge desires and cravings and the fantasies and the constant rumination about how can I get back at this person. It stops your need, in other words, to get back at that person at the pain level and your desire to do so at the wanting level. And then the last thing that it does inside the brain is it activates the prefrontal cortex, right? That's the decision-making and executive function and cost-benefit decision-making area of the brain. So it activates or reactivates that so you can make good decisions in your own self-interest. So we should be thinking about at the brain biological level, forgiveness is a true wonder drug. It is a human superpower that we are all wired to do. We all have it. We don't need a doctor's prescription for it, however. We don't have to see a doctor. We don't have to go to a pharmacy. We don't have to pay any money for it. I mean, it's a free, powerful, pain-deadening drug inside your own head if you will use it. And so that is an amazing way and powerful way of stopping these revenge desires is teaching, and I would start with kids, how to forgive. And it's an instinct. It's an instinct. So what you're really saying is you have permission to forgive. And we need to change the language and dialogue around forgiveness as being somehow a weakness. It is a true superpower that we have. It is not a weakness in your life to forgive. It is the only way, really, that most of us will ever have to heal ourselves from the wrongs of the past and leave those wrongs in the past so they stop infecting and ruining our present and our future. That's what forgiveness gives you. And it, by the way, doesn't have anything to do with all those benefits, have nothing to do with religion or spirituality. Religion and spirituality had the keen insight that there are powerful benefits to forgiveness, but it attached it to, maybe getting into heaven or becoming pious, all of which are fine and good. I'm a spiritual person, like I said, but at the brain biological level, it is an amazing drug.
Wow. So we all have this tendency to react to perceived or real pain that somebody inflicts on us with revenge. And the only way, and I say this too, I mean, I've said this for 12 years, but not in the same way. I say the only way for me to move past my pain, and I didn't talk about revenge, but now I know that I was that as well, is through forgiveness. I don't know any other way that I could have used to move beyond it. I know, and you say as well in your book, that forgiveness benefits the forgiver. And of course, I will never have a conversation with Adam Lanza. He killed himself at the scene. So you don't have to have a conversation. And I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for myself. It is. And so I can say, when you're talking about it, I have experienced all of that. And it's true. I say that it's the single most important thing that I did in my own personal healing. And forgiveness is something that, as you said, we have within us and you can do. It's a choice, but it helps to have some knowledge about that. We're in schools teaching forgiveness, and we're teaching this formula that gives you the personal power, returning your locus of control inside you from that victim standpoint, to be able to take control and to thoughtfully respond in your highest and best self, to make the changes necessary for a better future, which you did when you got back in the truck during that bullying situation. You were in control in your highest and best self. You drove away, and that was the best thing that you could do. This formula leads and guides you to doing that. And so absolutely incredible. And I know that we're going to continue this conversation. We're running short on time, but I know you didn't get to talking about the trial and at the mock trial, and even the definitions of justice, which I think, are really important. We've talked about one, which is the one that most of us think about, which is the punishment form of justice. But there is another definition of justice, and that's mercy and forgiveness. It doesn't mean not holding the person accountable for their actions. It doesn't even mean that there would be some form of punishment or, understanding in that they would have to have. But the mercy and forgiveness for yourself, receiving justice for yourself, is I believe the true definition of justice. That is the true justice. That's justice that doesn't continue to hurt you like the revenge-seeking justice does. But I want everybody to consider that, and you talk about that.
Well, and I distinguish carefully in the book, The Science of Revenge, between seeking revenge to punish people for wrongs of the past. That means the wrong already happened, and it's no longer available for any of us to experience with our senses, versus self-defense to prevent a imminent threat of personal harm or suffering, and that's a timeline difference that's critical. So punishing people for the wrongs of the past is what causes criminality and violence, as I've just said, and all sorts of intentionally inflicted human suffering. That to forgive the wrongs of the past does not mean that you are giving up in any way your right to defend yourself against a present threat of future or imminent harm to you. So you're not doing that, and it doesn't consign you to continue to maintain your presence in toxic relationships either. So there's no acceptance here of the person, what they've done to you, and endorsement of their bad acts. It's simply an act of self-healing for you, and taking control of your own brain so that it doesn't turn you from a victim into a perpetrator. That is what happens with revenge seeking. We are victims first, and then we start to become perpetrators of other people's pain and suffering.
So incredibly powerful. I know we didn't get to the trials that.
Yeah, the Miracle Court. And I'm sorry. Yeah, so I should mention it just briefly, but there's an app called the Miracle Court app that has this imaginary trial that you can use instantly. It's an audio driven. It's my voice taking you through the steps of a full trial in which you can put on trial anyone who's ever wronged you in your life. You get to try, convict, sentence, punish them. It's kind of like methadone for a revenge addict at first, because it gives you this opportunity to punish the person who wronged you safely inside your mind, not out in the real world where you would commit or inflict real harm. But then in the last step, in addition to the normal criminal trial, you become the judge of your own life, in which you look back on that trial and ask yourself, did going through that trial and all that imaginary punishment, did that really help me? Do I feel better as a result of doing that, or worse? Most people will find they feel a lot worse at that instant. And then you're given the opportunity to go, well, what would make me feel better at this moment? And you're given the opportunity to just imagine forgiving it now. And most folks at that point experience this instantaneous sense of relief and this weight lifting their shoulders. And that's from the pain network shutting down. So the pain is suddenly gone. And then the cravings are gone. So you no longer have to spend all of your energy trying to create and plot new ways to harm the person who wronged you, and nursing and nurturing your grievance, when you could actually just let it go. So it's there at miraclecourt.com. Yeah.
It's there. It's no cost. It's powerful. Right. I actually did it with a personal betrayal that I had experienced last year that I'm still thinking about. Yes, the Choose Love lady. And so I went through the entire process. And my favorite thing was towards the end, when you're the judge, you're the judge and you're also looking up at the judge, and the judge is talking down to you. And he was saying, or she was saying, does this exist anywhere other than in your own mind? And I was like, no. Is this happening now? Or was it something that happened in the past? And it just it really helped to put it in perspective that the only place that this grievance is happening right now is in my mind. And my thoughts are what is causing me pain. And that, how does that make you feel? Well, it doesn't make me feel good to think about it. How would it make you feel, ultimately, if you just let it go, if you forgave? Well, it would make me feel a lot better. And so, understanding that forgiveness, as we teach it in Choose Love, is just a choice. It's a choice. We help you get to that. This formula helps you get to that. Then it may become a process. You may drum up thoughts of it, and then you kind of go through that.
You forgive them again. You just forgive each time you're imagining forgiveness. And forgiveness, a lot of people, I was just doing a podcast the other day, and they said, but people think forgiveness is so hard. And I said, it's actually incredibly easy. We think it's hard, but it's not. Just don't forgive anybody. Just imagine what you would feel like if you did. As soon as you do that, you will get to experience this amazing sense of almost euphoric final, release. And when you get that, you'll want it again and again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh, this has been one of the most incredible conversations of my life, James. I really, really appreciate it. You bring so much to the table. This is a really important conversation. I urge everybody that is listening, please share this. Somebody that this could transform or maybe even save their lives, and everybody needs to hear this message. So thank you so much, James. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our advisor on Choose Love, and for being so generous with all of your material. Currently, we are writing lessons to incorporate the science of revenge into Choose Love, and we're going to be releasing those very soon. So all our Choose Love educators, be looking out for that in our newsletters and the Daily Dose of Love. I love you all. I'm so grateful for everything that you do in the world. James, that includes you now too. I want to extend, the farm that you love, and you want to be a farmer. I live on a farm, so I'm that farmer. So I want you to, and you're not that far down the road from me if you're still in New Haven.
I'm in Pennsylvania, and I actually live on a farm again. I have a small farm of my own. So I did get to bring it back around full circle.
Okay, that's great. Well, I want you to visit my farm, and I want to visit yours too.
That sounds great.
Yeah, that's great. And you all will be hearing a lot more of James Kimmel and his incredible finding, The Science of Revenge, my favorite book. So thank you so much, James. I really
Thank
appreciate
you. Thank you.
joining us today.
Thanks, Scarlett. Really appreciate this opportunity to be with you today.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love in a